Good evening, everyone, all our honored guests. Welcome to the October 11th meeting for the Planning Board, and I'd like to start with the pledge, please. Allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, nation. For those online and here, two of the items on the agenda have been removed for this evening. First one was Collier Park, that was removed until the October 24th. And the second, Mobile Graphics Building, was also moved until the 24th meeting. So with that, we have two items left, plus a discussion item at the end. Meeting minutes. We don't have any meeting minutes this time. Correspondence, don't believe we have any correspondence either. And Kim.
So your next meeting will be October 24th. And from tonight, we moved Collier Park over for the preliminary subdivision on County Road 9. Applicant is requesting approval to subdivide 12.9 acres into 6 individual lots with an existing house located on Lot 1. The second public hearing will be for Victor Community Church. It's a site plan application. Applicant is requesting approval to construct a 2,008 square foot addition with parking expansion around the north and west side of the building, proposing 18 new parking spaces to the west, as well as 2 new parking spaces to the south and 3 spaces to the east. That is on 251. And then Mobile Graphics, you mentioned, is moved to this agenda on Lane Road, site plan application. Applicant is requesting approval to demolish the pre-existing barn shed and construct a 3,800 square foot building to support their existing business. And then the fourth public hearing will be for the Elias Soil Stabilization. This is at 6949 Valentown Road. Site plan application. Applicant is requesting approval for the soil restoration and stabilization of a parcel from work performed during a recent pool installation. Are there any questions?
No, thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
All right. Ooh,
I'm up in the beginning.
yeah, you're up. Welcome.
Well, the ZBA, they have me come in at the end. Drew Cusimano, I know that I haven't met everyone here face to face, so it's very nice to meet you guys. Certainly interfaced a lot through reviewing your positions and recommendations at the town board level. But a bit about myself, since I haven't met all of you. I moved to Victor in 2013. We built a home off of Modoc Road. I was hired shortly thereafter for Fisher's Fire, so I work as a fire lieutenant up on High Street. Previous to that, and actually for a number of years after starting at the firehouse, I worked at Mercy Flight as a flight medic. So I come from that industry of emergency services and kind of entered the public service with the thought of continuing to serve in a parallel but very different setting. I'm coming up on my first re-election, so I've almost completed 4 years, and so far have very much enjoyed the work that I get to do with the town of Victor, and hope to continue on for at least another 4 years. I know that in reading the notes and seeing primarily what Dave Condon, being the liaison, has done, he offers some updates and information. I didn't really prepare too much for this evening, other than the only thing of significance that came out of last night was moving forward with our finalized budget and moving into the public hearings for that for next year. So we don't have the specific dollars and cents per thousand until it comes back from the county, but it's going to be a very relatively flat rate, $1.71. Sounds like it may go to $1.72 or so, but other than 1 or 2 pennies at the most, it's going to remain flat for the for next year. The only other comment I had related to the 7200 Rawson Road, I appreciate that's the most recent thing that we've reviewed the opinion and the recommendations from this group. So I really appreciate that, and it always, I think, helps us whether we ultimately align exactly. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, but I definitely really appreciate the positions that come out of this group. And I know that those recommendations specific to Rawson Road, I think, helped give us some feedback for the developer to come back with and hopefully amend some of those plans a little bit. So thank you, and I look forward to, for a very short term, for the next 3 months, being with you guys. Thank you.
Hey, welcome, Drew.
See you next meeting.
Appreciate your coming by. I assume you may be participating at the end in the conversation about the rezoning? Or just here to listen? Will you be participating in the discussion we have at the end regarding the zoning district for Eastview?
So, that's where I acclimate to this group a little bit more. I know with the ZBA, I'm much more of a passive observer and take back information. So, this is my first time serving as a liaison to this group, so I would plan to be engaged as much as, you would hope of me.
Feel free to jump in as we talk about it, so
All right, thank you.
thank you. All right, well, we might get to that quicker than I thought. So, Woods at Valentine, revised section 1, the first item up, request an extension of time. This is on High Point Drive. The applicant received approval July 26, 2022, to construct 2 apartment buildings of 84 for-rent apartments on 8.1 acres. Pursuant to the Town Code 21131F2, the applicant is required to obtain a building permit within 1 year of the date of the resolution granting approval. Applicant is requesting their second 90-day extension to Section 21131F2, and that is what is before us this evening. Any questions regarding this? These are pretty straightforward, I think. There's no objection, I'll read the resolution. For the Woods at Valentine revised section 1, application 16 SP 2021 on High Point Drive, whereas a letter dated September 27th, 2023, James Creedicos, on behalf of his client, the applicant, for Commercial Street Partners, the project, requested a 90-day extension of time to obtain building permit in accordance with the Victor Town Code, section 21131F2, and whereas the code section cited provides that an applicant shall obtain a building permit for any project that has received site plan approval within 1 year from the date of resolution granting site plan approval, whether such approval is conditional or otherwise. If a building permit is not issued within 1 year, the site plan approval shall expire. The 1-year period may be extended by the planning board for up to 2 90-day periods at the discretion of the planning board. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town of Victor Planning Board grants the second 90-day extension of time for the project to obtain a building permit.
I'll move.
Ernie, makes a motion, or second?
Second.
Joe, seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried 5-0 for the extension of Woods at Valentine, revised section 1. So the next item is similar for the Victor Chrysler Dodge Ram and Jeep car wash. The first 90-day extension building request is before us. At 6484 State Route 96, the owner's Victor East Holding Company. It's zoned commercial light industrial, application 22 SP 2022. The applicant received the approval on October 12, 2022 to install an 1,880 square foot extension external car wash to replace the internal car wash stations that were approved for the new commercial building. Pursuant to Town Code 21131F2, the applicant is required to obtain a building permit within 1 year of the date of the resolution granting approval. Applicant is requesting their first 90-day extension to Section 21131F2. And with that, I have a draft resolution for the application, 22 SP 2022, whereas by a letter dated September 29th, 2023, Don Temperado, on behalf of his client, the applicant, for the Victor East Holding Company, LLC, the project, requested a 90-day extension of time to obtain a building permit in accordance with Victor Town Code, Section 21131F2, and whereas the code section stated provides that an applicant shall obtain a building permit. It's exactly the same thing I read last time. Now therefore be it resolved that Town of Victor Planning Board grants the first 90-day extension of time for the project to obtain a building permit.
Move.
Al moves.
Second.
Ernie?
Yep.
Ernie seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried 5-0. Those are the two actionable items, I believe, this evening, but we do have one discussion item here, which is the new commercial center, CC zoning district, being proposed for the Eastview Mall, and I'm going to ask Wes to kind of introduce this, and I think he has a PowerPoint.
Yep, I do.
Thanks, Wes.
All right, settle in. We've got a long PowerPoint here tonight.
322 slides.
Susie, could you flip me? All right, thank you. Just as a start, I don't think, maybe Joe, you got a copy of that. So earlier this evening, I just placed in each of your places an article that a colleague of mine wrote that's appearing in the Towns and Topics magazine, or Talk of the Towns magazine. And it has to do with, bricks and mortar retail and communities dealing with, how their retail business is changing, right? A lot of things are bought online, delivery via drones, and ways in which communities can prepare and evolve for that. So it's kind of a timely article that was just released. But with specifically to the town of Victor, I wanted to talk a little bit with you about the commercial zoning district in the town of Victor, and specifically in the area around the mall. So what you see up on the screen is a zoning map for the town, and we want to focus in here on the yellow area, kind of in the northwest section of the town. That's where Eastview Mall is. And basically this zoning map, as you know, it divides the town into different zoning districts. It separates conceivable incompatible uses like residential from industrial, that sort of thing. And zoning regulates the use, the density of use, and the location of development. And this is a presentation that I gave to the town board a while back, I think most recently maybe in May, and now they have referred to you a couple of draft local laws for consideration. So I wanted to talk specifically about the commercial district and the uses and where we can find the commercial district in the town. So the existing regulation, section 211.22, identifies the permitted uses in the commercial zoning district. And as you can see on the map that's on the left, the yellow highlights are the areas zoned commercial in the town today. And you can see that the uses on the right: bed and breakfast, healthcare, and institutional, not-for-profit, essential services, so on and so forth. So the district dimensions, the existing dimensional requirements associated with the yellow commercial zoning district are minimum lot size of 30,000 square feet, lot frontage of 150 feet, lot depth of 200. And there are some maximums associated with that: number of stories, building height, and building coverage. So each of these dimensional requirements and everything that we've talked about so far applies uniformly to each of these yellow areas, whether it's this small yellow area down here along 96, or whether it's this larger commercial zoning area up in here. All of the dimensional requirements and use requirements are the same. So with the commercial district, there are some limitations, and specifically when we're looking at the mall area, and I've got a little quote up there. It says, "The mall of today may not be the mall of tomorrow," right? Eastview Mall was built in 1971, expanded in 1995. The mall may transition. I think we've seen in other parts of the nation. Some malls are closing. For example, the one up in Irondequoit, that one's closed. Eastview Mall, that has evolved. There's some medical use in that facility, Marketplace. Did I say Eastview? Yeah. Yeah, my bad. Marketplace Mall in Henrietta. So back in 2019, I think the town of Victor is trying to prepare for this, right? And get ahead and think about ways in which the mall may be viable in the future. So the town adopted a mixed-use overlay district back in 2019. So this would require a developer to submit a mixed-use plan for the site, subject to review and approval by the town board. So this could include a mix of uses that aren't specifically identified in the zoning code today under the commercial zoning district, right? So there could be a component of residential, maybe an entertainment component, conference center type of component, something, a mix of those things that is, useful and could be viable for that space in the future. It provides flexibility with respect to the multiple principal uses, and we'll just click here to the next slide. So this is the mixed-use overlay boundary that was adopted, right? It encompasses Eastview Mall. It also encompasses the movie theater, which is back down here. And this district deals with uses only, or the overlay district only deals with uses. And property is still subject to the underlying zoning district requirements with respect to dimensions, the area, the height, lot coverage, setbacks, that sort of thing. So what the town is contemplating at this point, and what they're referring to you, is the creation of a brand-new zoning district that doesn't exist today, and calling it the Commercial Center Zoning District. It's a very similar boundary to the mixed-use overlay that provides for the same underlying uses that are allowed in the commercial zoning district today. It provides for an expanded opportunity related to the form of dimension and future development. And specifically, one of the main differences here you'll notice is the maximum height allowable. And we'll look at some of the comparison here. Let's compare. I don't know if this is difficult to read. It might be, especially from your angle in the bright green colors. So the three columns here, we've got the dimensional characteristics identified here in this left-hand column, right? The middle column is the commercial zoning district and the numeric figures that are associated with each of these dimensional requirements, and then the proposed commercial center district dimensional requirements in the right-hand column. So for the minimum lot size, we've had, in the existing district, minimum lot size is 30,000 square feet. For this proposed zoning district, it would be 435,600 square feet. So much larger in size. Lot frontage, 150 feet versus 500 feet for the new zoning district. Lot depth, 200 feet in the existing commercial district, proposing to be 500 feet of lot depth in the commercial center. The front yard setback is 80 feet, but it would be, in the commercial center, it would be 100 feet, so an increase of 20 feet. Rear yard, 60 feet commercial zoning district, and the commercial center would be 100 feet. Side yard, 5 feet or 25 feet, and then 50 feet for the commercial center. So the maximum, the number of stories, right now, the commercial zoning district limits the maximum stories to 2, and the draft regulations indicate a maximum height of 6 stories, or 90 feet. So building height is 35 feet today, but it could be 90 feet in the commercial center zoning district. Accessory structures, it's remaining the same. We haven't suggested or proposed any changes there. It's just 35 feet maximum height, and building coverage would still remain at 40%. That's a bit of a comparison between the existing and what's proposed. So this new zoning district would encompass the movie theater area, BJ's store, Macy's, Von Maur, JCPenney, the mall. There's about 181 acres, 1.3 million square feet, and over 140 million in assessment, and there are significant sales tax revenues from this area. So that's the long-winded version of the PowerPoint, and just wanted to see if you guys had any questions or comments, concerns.
So I have some of all the above.
Okay.
So Wes, what, I guess in your professional opinion, is it that the current zoning doesn't afford to be done that requires a new zoning type, CC, to be created?
Yeah, I guess I'll go back to one of these slides.
Yeah, I'll just lean in.
Okay.
Right, so I understood the
Yeah,
chart, right? But,
right.
but to the extent that it could have a variance for any of those, if that's the restriction, it could be reclassified as a PDD. But I'm just talking about, right, I mean, we have broad options today. And could not one or, more than one of those be used to accommodate whatever specific, site-specific use is being contemplated here? And then I guess the last question is, does anybody know if the town is contemplating any other area in the town to be rezoned to CC? Because
Yeah.
to me, this really starts fundamentally changing the character of the town of Victor, when you start talking about nine-story buildings. So if we really believe it's going to just be to repurpose Eastview Mall area, then aren't there other alternatives to accomplish that without creating a whole new zoning type?
Yeah, I suppose there could be. I suppose you could use the Plan Development District rezoning as a tool to accomplish this. This might, that's a good question. I'm wondering if this might provide a developer with some ideas of where the town would accept, a type of proposal. Like, to what degree would they allow an increase in height or an increase in, setback requirements? But I think that's a fair
Couldn't
question.
a zoning variance accomplish any one of those variants off of the current?
Well, it could. The difference there is that variances are exceptions to the zoning code, as you know, right?
Right, but so is the
And-
creation of a whole new zoning
Yeah.
type.
Yeah.
That's an extreme exception.
Yeah. So, if today's limit is 2 stories or 35 feet maximum height, if someone were to appeal to get a 5-story building, or even a 4-story building, or 50 feet, that might be a tall challenge for them to get.
But somehow magically 9 stories is okay because we just created a new zoning type.
Yeah. So right, and maybe 6 stories isn't the right number. So I think the town planning, or the town board would probably appreciate some feedback in terms of, if the 6 stories is too tall or 90 feet.
Was it 9 stories or 6?
6 stories,
okay.
6 stories or 90 feet. If that's too tall, what would that height limit be then?
Right.
Right.
But, and I guess my point is, first of all, I'll state, I'm all for trying to find creative solutions to repurposing the real estate, because I get the market dynamics and real estate dynamics, and so I'm not opposed to it, but I'm just saying, is this really the only option to create, a whole new zoning type to accomplish whatever is being contemplated?
There probably are other avenues that this can be accomplished in. Yeah.
So, anyway, so those were my questions or comments.
So Wes, to piggyback on that a little bit, the commercial, what are we calling this, commercial?
Commercial center?
Center, thank you. Is that a common zoning classification elsewhere within the state, region? Is this something that we've,
No, it would be unique to the town of Victor. Each municipality has the ability to create and provide their own unique name to their own zoning districts, right? So there may be other districts around the state that have very similar dimensional characteristics. They might call it something a little bit different than commercial center.
yeah,
It just happens to be the term that we've chosen for
so
now.
understanding that you could make a repurpose of one of the parcels on Eastview Mall. We'll talk Lord and Taylor for the moment, because that's kind of vacant. You could put in, like if you go to Henrietta and look at Marketplace, you mentioned it, they have a new U of R medical center. I want to say it's at least 5 stories, maybe it's 4, but it's pretty tall. Is that, if you put something like that in front of the Eastview Mall buildings and you covered over the view shed of some of the buildings in back, for instance, Von Mauer, then you've changed the character of the building enough that the people of Von Mauer invested in getting the approvals of the dome and everything else back there, that might interrupt their viability in terms of visibility for their business within the mall. And then the other thing is, Al kind of alluded to it, what's to prevent someone else from coming back and looking for an exception, Walmart in particular, or that, Victor Commerce Park, to build something very tall next to, residential areas. And I think that should be addressed in terms of, here's the reasoning why this is that. It doesn't have residential right next to it. It's not, adjacent to or abutting residences. It's an appropriate location to do something more exceptional. Whereas other commercial districts that are that large in the town are not, because. So I would want to make sure that we have some sort of guidance, or at least part of the resolution that creates this district, to say that it's being created because it's not this, or because, we're trying to provide buffers between residences and commercial districts without, exceptionally elevating the buildings in those areas, or the potential for that.
So if I could piggyback on that a little bit, I had similar thoughts, Joe. And if I look at something that's 435,000 square feet, to put that in scale, is that relative to like the Lord and Taylor store? I don't know how many square feet that is. I'm trying to picture.
It's the whole site, I think, right?
Lord and Taylor's
Like 10 acres, right?
93,000.
How many?
It's,
93,000.
So we're talking a substantially bigger building than we've got already. So to your point, if you look at the areas where a building like this might conceivably go, it might be on lots 12.700, 12.600, the theater spaces. We may spell out a little bit more where something of that size and scale would be appropriate and not interfere with the view shed. It would also back up to the expressway where it wouldn't be, again, to Joe's point about the view shed and the way it looks. We're going to modify it to where it's going to be allowed.
Isn't Eastview Mall, as it sits right now, isn't it a PDD as it sits?
I think it's a commercial district, and,
It's commercial, okay.
yeah.
I guess I think that the PDD, and it's kind of interesting because it ties in with our prior discussions regarding that project on Rawson Road and some other ones that came before us, but that seems to me to be a better way to do it for something like that. I think what you've identified, presents some uses. I think the uses are important for the board to consider, but dimensionally, the PDD gives you the latitude to adjust these to something reasonable depending on what comes before you, versus, publishing these dimensional numbers, which I don't know if they're appropriate or not based on these uses. I have no idea what size building you're supposed to have, but I assume the applicant comes forward and justifies in some way why they need this space or that space. I also think that, given these dark stores and ghost kitchens and micro fulfillment centers that are cited here, what are those parking requirements dimensionally? I don't know what they are, and I think they're going to be dependent on that use and information that we really don't have before us, to the extent that we can say, well, it needs to be 10 acres or it needs to be 8 or whatever. I think the PDD gives you that latitude. We've been seeing it used in a residential capacity, I think, more than the mixed-use capacity. This seems to be the mixed-use capacity to me.
Okay.
What was the impetus for this coming in the first place? Is it just, I'm reading here that's handouts that you gave us, Wes?
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the handout that I provided. It would just happen to be kind of coincidental that these two things came before you at the same time. So I think the impetus is that the town is thinking about the viability of the mall in the future, right? And with failing malls nationwide, and just trying to be nimble in terms of flexibility and being able to have this site be viable for uses and a configuration that would work in the future, right? So if this bricks and mortar retail, the classic mall doesn't pan out in the long run, what else are we going to do with this? Is it just going to go? Is the mall just going to sit vacant and not not be a viable site and turn into an eyesore in the town of Victor? Or what can the town do? What can the town do to prepare in the
Right.
event?
And again, that's where I'm back to, I'm fully supportive of the purpose of, right, keeping it a vibrant, viable site, right, so it doesn't become a vacant. But I'm just saying, right, does it really require the creation of a commercial center, or whatever CC stands for, again, versus an existing capabilities to offer flexible solutions?
So to Scott's comment about the PDD, I'm concerned about, I mean, I'm looking through the list of PDDs we have in the town. You have Affrontes at McMahon Road, Conifer Village, Eastgate Square, Eastgate Commons, Forest Park, Gypsum Mills. You go to Royal Car Wash at Colin Parks, that's a PDD. Can you put a 6-story building in a PDD now if you just stick with the PDD? You know, if you start saying, all right, Eastview, let's make a PDD out of it, and you can put a 6-story building to these limits, somebody else that's going to want to do a PDD in an area that really isn't
You
intended
have to do the whole
for that.
seeker process on the
Correct,
impact, right?
but it starts a precedent on a PDD that I don't know if we want to go down that road with. You know what I'm saying?
I guess I would say, I think it's project dependent, project specific.
Yeah, and all these PDDs are pretty clear that that's the case. But,
And those ones that you just cited, they just seem to be primarily, with the exception of the car wash, seem to be residential, and we've had discussions about that as to where the actual mixed use can be found.
yeah, there's Pinnacle Athletic Campus, which is a PDD as well.
that's true.
That's a different one.
And by the way, if the purpose was we need a 6-story building in Eastview Mall to keep it vibrant, then just, again, it would be a zoning waiver that says, yeah, in that location, because it's site-specific, you can go up 6 stories.
Right.
So if you have a zoning district, we have to be pretty explicit about what can be or can't be allowed in that particular district now. So if we're going to do this commercial center, you know, I think we're going to run into issues with building placement, building height in front of, and all that kind of stuff, as well as, we'll have to do the whole seeker process
Right.
in terms of what the use is, and then how many vehicles or how much traffic that will generate within the mall, right?
That's right.
All
That's
of
right.
that stuff
Yeah.
still comes before the board,
Right.
yeah.
What has Wilmerite offered in terms of information as to what they'd like to see for future development?
They probably they probably drafted
Well, that's exactly what I'm getting at.
No, I don't think
No,
they did, but-
I think Labella drafted this with some assistance from Mark Terrian, and then I don't know that Wilmerite really expressed.
I have a question, Wes.
Sure.
With the Eastview Mall mixed-use overlay that exists today, does that go away, or does that go away?
That
It
was-
stays in place?
Right.
It just.
And it deals
becomes-
with uses only.
So right, so the
That's per-
uses,
Yep, that provides.
Only.
Yep, that provides flexibility to allow some additional uses that aren't conceived in today's commercial zoning district.
I'd be real curious to know what Wilmerite thinks they should have, or what they would identify as their future needs, as just part of the discussion. I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea to ask the people who actually own the property what they think about it.
First, I'd like to say, and push me out of the way.
It was the first
So
time.
she could ask the question that I was patiently waiting to ask Wes. I did want to clarify that same thing. So unless it were let's consider a retail store that said, we're going to build a 6-story retail, that could comply with this. If this were approved, that could go through that process. I think that most of the reasonable, or what I would see is the reason why this would be created to go height-wise, so to that 6 stories or 90 feet, probably, right, is going to fall outside of what the current retail setting is up there, and it's going to require special approval based on that special mixed use that we did in 19. At least that's the way I would interpret it. I also wanted to mention, Al, I believe the first point you made, are there other areas in the town that this would be considered? To my knowledge, no. I know nothing of another area where, you know, we would look to expand this or apply this at this time. That's not something that has been a discussion, at least that I've been involved in.
Right.
I think, and I know you guys have bounced it back and forth, my understanding from the town board side is that it creates a, maybe a little bit more of a welcoming environment, so that rather than having to apply for a zoning variance, which I think also could be pretty challenging, because it's so, you know, so far and away different than the standard expectation, I think it would have a hard time getting a zoning variance. So I think that it's creating an opportunity to allow an influx of interest.
Right, but in my mind, those are like conflicting things we're saying. It would be tough to get a variance for a 6-story building, but we're gonna just make it one, right? So I just feel like either it's not fit for the site, and we shouldn't approve this if that's the condition, or we should be able to approve it through a zoning variance.
But I think to that point where we've identified, you know, this Eastview Mall commercial area is truly a unique, not only to the town, but regionally, a very unique commercial property that is very high-density commercial, where the opportunity to go up might be very realistic and applicable to that piece of property, versus other areas around town where I don't think 90 feet, 6 stories, I don't think that really honestly should be anywhere outside of that area up there. So I think the creation of this special area versus a variance to where you could apply variances to different properties around the town. And I don't really know if that provides any answer to your point, but I think, you know, the reason for.
It's a thought process. I don't think there's any right or wrong answers here.
Yeah, and certainly I know Wes and I a while back, handful of months ago, had a good discussion on the height of this when you were working through some of that process, and I believe the initial number listed was 7 stories, and we had talked about that, and I know that it ended up being at 6, and I still, depending on, you know, I'm very interested to hear the opinions of this, because I think that, you know, certainly we relate to the development in the village here, and there was some, you know, pretty widespread opinion about the height of that building, and I think that a discussion of height in a town of our character is a very important discussion, because height can distinguish itself very differently than almost anything else. You know, 1.3 million square feet, and, you know, from the fire service side, we call it a skyscraper laying down, because there's a lot of the same type of infrastructural needs and, you know, strategies for carrying out fire operations, just like a high-rise. But from the perspective of the layperson, the resident, the passerby, height is a dramatic and noticeable change, almost comparative to anything else. So I think that, you know, we have to be very mindful of that.
Do we have to indicate a height number? Can we say it's variable? Can we say it's project dependent or something like that?
So I think, and I could be wrong, but I think kind of one of the core points of creating this type of a district would be to identify that height that we'd be looking for as a max. And then, you know, then I think that would make it more challenging for a variance to allow for something dramatically different than that. But I don't know. And I know the discussion on the PDD, I mean, I think that these are all viable and interesting things to consider. But I know that the point of this commercial district is really to identify an area that is most applicable to dramatic change, being, you know, moving away from 2 stories to 3, 4, 5, or 6, and create a little bit more of an enticing environment for outside and other than retail business environments to come in to the mall property.
How did the Von Moore building, which I think that's got to be more than 35 feet, right? Those domes that they
I want
have?
to say it's like 45-ish.
So how did that get approved? Was that through a variance?
It's a height variance,
Was it?
yeah.
I turned off the PowerPoint so that I could get into my network, because I have some photos that I was going to share.
It should just be screen sharing, so
Let me
that's
see,
kind of bizarre.
I don't know for sure. I'd be willing to bet the peak of the dome at Von Maur is above 50 feet.
Yeah.
I think so
But
too.
again, that was addressed through a variance.
Was it okay?
Yeah.
All right, so when Wes started this discussion, he said 90 feet. And I looked at Von Maur,
Right.
and the tip of that building is a good 45 feet anyway. So imagine doubling that height.
Right.
And my point was, I wouldn't want to see a double height building in front of all that in the mall. I think it would block the view of what's really there. Because, I mean, if you put a building that tall in the front of the parking lot, as a separate element with parking garages underneath it and stuff to manage parking, you block the whole view of the mall. So I truly think that this can't just be, well, you can put a 90-foot building there. I think there has to be some guidance as to what would be acceptable to a potential applicant coming before the board with one of the footprints, whether it's Macy's or Lord and Taylor or
Sure,
whatever.
and Wes, I don't know if you can maybe add some clarification to that. My position as one member of the board would be, I think that what you're saying is completely applicable, and it would be ludicrous to put a 5 or 6 story building on the front side of the mall. I don't even think that would be feasible, because considering that from that entrance 1, 2, 3 along the front side of the mall, that's their probably most prime parking and their most limited parking for retail. I don't see that being applicable, but if it's set up that way with this commercial district, Wes, what would be the process for placement of the structure on that property?
Site plan review. Site plan review by the planning board.
Right.
So if somebody came forth and said, wow, we want to be front and center, plopped right along 96 there, that could be something that would just simply be denied based on the reasoning of, you're going to take away a viewpoint of the primary structure.
Yeah, it seems to me it would fail from a visual impact
Yeah,
perspective.
I 100% agree. I think that the true point of this would be, that largely vacant parking lot that's deteriorated alongside where the old Funscape was, and on the backside, there's a lot of open acreage and parking that is underutilized 99% of the year. I think that that's probably the intent, or that's my understanding of what the intent would be. I don't think that you could feasibly put a large structure on the front side of that mall.
Not without exceptional parking arrangements.
It would, yeah, without building a parking garage.
Yeah, that, and honestly, this mall really needs a connection to 490. And I think the state should have put in long ago an extension of 250 up to 490 that the mall could then tie into, because the mall's not allowed to directly connect with 490. It's not feasible for a private road to join an interstate. So, as I'm sure most of you know. So, if they start, I don't want to say playing with, but if they start reimagining this site, you're going to have some traffic problems that we can't entertain right now. And maybe it's the same amount of vehicles that can park on site because, you've got offices instead of lots of people coming in at Christmas time shopping, for instance. But still, it's going to be a madhouse at Christmas time if you have a 6-story building with medical facilities or some other, I don't even know what would go in there. I'm just thinking of Marketplace, but.
There's a picture of Marketplace up on
there
the
you go.
screen.
So that's what, 4 stories?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
4.
it dominates the site. I
Mhm.
mean, I've gone by, my daughter lives out in Henrietta, so I go by there from time to time. So it's impressive, and it's a great use of the space. But it would be a change in character should it block the view from, say, Macy's were to move on or something.
So we'd have the same debate
Yeah.
in the site plan discussion
Right.
as we would through normal business. So
Right.
again, that's why I'm saying, do we really need to create a new standalone?
I honestly think that if you do that, I think I'm a little contrarian, Al, that if you do this district, this commercial center, that you're telling developers, you can't do this anywhere else in the town because this is where you can do this. And yeah, you might be attracting some development that you weren't before, but I think that's to keep the ability for that mall to remain viable in this market. Maybe you need to do that. And we don't know what could be imagined, but we still have to review it all. So,
When we looked at, and as we went through the process of the eminent domain proceedings, which are still ongoing, related to the Lord and Taylor property, the board got a lot of information on how these malls succeed, how the malls fail, and I thought that, I kind of walked into the information that I received, kind of thinking it was going to be mundane and not very interesting. I thought it was actually tremendously interesting in seeing what makes these successful and how they slowly taper off and fail. And I think that's one of the big objectives here, is to identify a plan that we can implement into place, and whether it's utilized and taken advantage of right away or it's many years to come, it's going to allow, I mean, quite honestly, the failure of the Eastview Mall property, I don't think is an option. That needs to adapt and to change over the next couple of decades. And I think the mall that we see in 30 years from now up there, I think is probably going to look very, very different than the way that it looks today. And I think that this is probably just one of those foundational steps to take to allow some future development and growth and change that's going to be
And if that
needed.
is the case, if it's really site-specific, should that then be the code codified that way that says, like, don't even consider rezoning anything else in the town of Victor to this new CC type? It's
Yeah.
very much limited to that parcel. Full stop.
And I like the idea that came up about asking Wilmerite what they envision as a future. They might be going in a different direction entirely. I mean, we don't know.
I think it's a question worth asking. I also think from a best management practice perspective, you know, you can talk to the town of Henrietta. I certainly know a number of people over there and ask them what they did in their particular situation with their zoning and how they handled it. I think we're all in the same boat, so to speak, around
I
here.
think they were reactive rather than proactive like we're trying to be. Marketplace was just about dead, I think, at that.
I don't know for sure. But I know who to make a phone call to find out.
If you walk around, so I was over at that medical facility in the past 6 months, and I was, you know, waiting for her to get out of the procedure, and I walked around, I guess you'd call it the mall. I hadn't been there in years, and I think that that gave me a very good perception of why we are going to try to do something like this, because Eastview Mall appearing as the bones of what Marketplace used to look like, I don't think would be a viable option for us as a town, as a county, as a region. So I think it's really a very interesting topic, because the changes that could come from this are certainly substantial. But I think that they're unknowns, and I think, you know, I hate to make a decision and support something that I don't ultimately know what is going to be there. You know, is it business, office, senior living, skilled nursing, hotels, you know, a complex for, you know, large meetings and convention.
Casino?
Yeah, I don't think a casino. I don't see that as an option up there. But who knows what it ultimately is going to be? I don't, and I haven't heard of one definitive idea of this is what we're trying to get in there. Haven't heard of one. But I do think that ultimately I don't want to see, even though it's great and new development at Marketplace, you know, what they started with over there was certainly not desirable.
That's an interesting comment about the casino. I mean, we don't have that as a allowable use in the town, I don't believe, but
No,
I
I
could
don't think so.
imagine that a
We
casino
also
would
didn't
want a
have
nine-story or six-story,
marijuana
well, yeah, that's
shops.
a whole nother,
Is a
yeah, just go to Seneca.
good use.
Cattaraugus Reservation, you can not have a problem. But the casino part, I don't know if I'd want to see that kind of an entertainment proposal come into town. You could easily propose something like that with a, you know, hotel, part of mixed use in that, and have a casino on that whole Lord and Taylor end. That's something that we want? Do we need to, you know, be contrarian about codifying that somehow, or what?
That would require a whole nother change to local law, would it not?
Well, that could be, I suppose a developer could suggest or submit an application under the mixed-use development overlay district that exists today to have that casino use. And that would be subject, that's at the town board's review, right? So the town board would have to contemplate whether or not they wanted to permit a casino type of use.
Yeah, and personally, that's not a discussion I've heard come up.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I've already kind of stated the reasons of my understanding, but setting ourselves up for some future successes up there is going to be tremendously important.
Turning Stone has a hotel that is multi-story,
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we want to see that.
It's easily 15 stories anyway. You can see that
We,
one for,
we went on the Thruway over the weekend to an event, had to go by it, and you can't miss it. It's huge.
so, what else can we offer? Are these minutes going to be just brought to the board's attention, or?
I think that's probably the most informative thing for the board, the town board members, would be to review maybe the minutes of this discussion.
Yeah,
I think that would be helpful, because I think there's varied opinions, and I think there's some feasible alternative ideas that maybe the town board would want to consider.
anybody else have any comments that we've sort of either stepped on or you didn't get a chance to ask yet? Ernie?
Well, I think one advantage, which has probably been discussed, is that the tax base, if you're adding more floors, you're adding more square footage and more taxes.
Scott?
Assuming it doesn't get a tax abatement.
Oh, I'll add one point to that, because it is a concern I have, and depending on the type of use that comes in for this, think healthcare. There's the taxes you're gonna bring in from a healthcare versus a hotel are gonna be very, very different. So, that is one area of maybe special concern that I have, is understanding how that process gets approved and ultimately, you think about it from the multi-level perspective of EMS, fire, law enforcement, government taxes, maintaining the infrastructure. There are certain types of uses that the town, the county is not going to see the same tax revenue as they are from other types of development. And I'd hate to say that we don't want one thing because we're not going to get tax dollars from it, but that's certainly something to consider heavily, because when you add infrastructure of that size, and that you're not increasing your tax base, that could offer some, maybe some of what you're yielding from that wasn't the initial intended interest.
Of course, conversely to that, right now, there's no sales tax coming from Lord and Taylor. I mean, it's closed down. There's no revenue from sales,
Other than the property.
other than the property taxes themselves.
Yeah.
So you get increased property taxes, and I don't know what other revenue you can get from a medical facility other than property tax based on the value of the building, but.
Or what if a nonprofit were to go in there?
Well, yeah. So,
There goes the property tax.
there you go. It's zero now from a sales tax perspective. It'll be more with a more impressive building, but I could see that as being somebody's argument for, hey, we can come in and make something coming out of nothing right now.
Is the Goodwill store pay taxes?
I don't know.
It is a not-for-profit.
Yeah, I know.
Probably just
Good question.
property. Well, they're leasing that. I
Right,
believe
it
they're
depends who
leasing
owns the
space.
building.
Yeah, right. The
So-
owner, I don't know if they get benefit for having a nonprofit in their building, leasing the
Probably
building.
not.
But then again, to what I'm saying, there's secondary, tertiary opportunities for you put a medical facility in there. Well, what did I do when I dropped my family member off for a procedure? I
went
went and spent
shopping.
money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that there are some, no matter what we do from
Well,
the
there's
property
benefits,
tax.
for sure,
In
yeah.
addition, there are some benefits, but there are also some concerns to work through there from a tax base.
So I'm just back to what problem are we trying to solve? We want the site to remain vibrant.
Yep.
And is this the only or best solution to that problem?
Well, I think that the board has a lot to chew on. We've given them some more thoughts. Scott, anything else?
I would just say that I think the owner of the property, being in the mall business, must have a pretty good idea of what the forecast is for their business and what they need to survive.
Yeah.
Getting that information and bringing it into the mix of this discussion, I think would be really important.
One thing that I've taken away that I'd like to bring back to the board, and certainly in addition to the minutes, would be to present and offer some feedback from the PDD versus, the proposal. And that sounds like, from the head nods, that's something that you guys would like us to consider at the town level.
Yeah, and the implications of doing that versus the commercial center. And if you do a PDD right now, I don't think anyone can put a building higher than 35 feet in the town, even in a PDD.
But again, it could be approved through a
Yeah,
variance.
But how would it, I guess I understand how would a developer know that that's something worth pushing for if we didn't have that somewhere in the code that here's an area that we'd consider it versus.
There's lots of things developers come in that aren't in the code that they propose.
So with the Rinaldi project at High Point, the newest building, 4 stories up there, that's a PDD. but that fourth story, the 4 stories required a variance, is that correct?
I don't think
There
so.
was a
So it's
building,
part of the PDD.
It's written in.
So I
yeah,
guess that's why I'm asking that, because
Right.
if we had a PDD there,
Your vertical and
you
your
could set your
horizontal. are-
vertical right there.
but, so this would be a rezoning from a commercial center, a commercial district to a
Right,
PDD.
you just wouldn't have to create a new zoning type to
Right.
Do
accomplish
you,
it.
do you make a PDD out of just the one footprint of, say, Lord and Taylor?
You do the whole
It's a
site.
separately owned parcel. I
I'd do the
believe.
whole site, just like we're proposing doing a commercial center, just make it
So
all a
I-
PDD.
So if somebody buys Lord and Taylor, they have to rezone the site as a PDD to put something right there. And then, all right, somebody comes along and says, well, I want to buy Macy's or Penny's or something and do something there. So you get a rezone again as a
No,
PDD.
I'm
right?
saying right now, the town has it in its wherewithal, just like they're gonna rezone this property,
Yeah,
they could rezone it as a PDD, the whole site.
yeah, but every PDD is very specific.
And that's probably what we want.
Well, no, but my point is, you're doing a rezoning for one footprint.
We're not.
But I think too, if we look at, let's take High Point, for example. Those are individual parcels. And the way that the code is written, it's written for those individual parcels. Each lot has its own use. I don't know about like dimensional requirements, but I think the uses are probably written into that code.
So you're saying if we made a PDD out of East New Mall, the whole site, that each time someone comes in to do a building redo or add something on, you don't have to change the PDD zoning because it's already a
I would.
planned
I would-
development district?
I would refer to West, but I would think that if you're gonna do, if the town board was gonna rezone, it's gonna rezone all of the parcels to Al's point, and each parcel would have something specific related to it. It could all be the same, but maybe
if
I'm
you-
not
if-
answering your question.
Well, I'm struggling because it's a plan, usually when a planned development district comes before us, it's, I want to do this to Colin Parks, I want to do this to the, I need a car wash here, and then, there's like different things, and I'm trying to think of the other
Well,
ones.
you're right, because with High Point, you've got uniformity in that
Yeah.
PDD. You've got uniform buildings of uniform sizes, even though they're not in agreement with whatever the standard
Yeah.
zoning would be. So I think what, you want to write it in a certain kind of way. You want the PDD language to be flexible so that what's there right now is, so to speak, grandfathered into its current dimensions with whatever you're proposing, and then the board can evaluate that for compatibility. But it seems to me that you can maintain the status quo by doing the PDD, it just stays the way it is, and then if something comes along that's proposed, like a medical facility or who knows what, then you have the ability to keep everything the way that it is and see how it matches in with that. I think this discussion, in my mind anyway, seems to be headed towards taking a look at the PDD zoning that we have and maybe reworking it in a way that does more affect mixed zone uses than perhaps we've been doing in the past.
Is there a perception thing with the, and I'm asking because I don't know, PDD, in its definition, is Planned Development District. Typically, the PDDs that you look through the list of the ones we have, and I could be wrong, but most, if not all of them, come from a plan that is presented, and the PDD is executed around that exact plan. We have no plan for this, so there, it's a little bit of a different concept than, when I think about.
But that's where I'm back to, we're solving a problem that hasn't existed yet.
But I
We're
think
trying to create a whole new zoning type.
But I think that we're trying to ultimately avoid the deterioration of the mall.
But
and
a
then having to
PDD
put
has
that-
many, many more listings of use types.
Yeah, and the whole thing that I'm familiar with in using PDD zoning on many projects is just the flexibility that you have as the developer's consultant to come in with something. I mean, we were talking about the other day when, was it on that residential property and the tie distances to the foundation or whatever it was, and or I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but the ability to have that flexibility, I think is huge. And because these bulk requirements, as we call them, there's something that appear on a piece of paper, but that only really works in cookie cutter development. It doesn't really work in trying to fit sites like Eastview Mall or Cobblestone or any of these commercial properties. just doesn't work. I mean, it's a number, you publish it, okay, it's there, it's in the book, but, 9 out of 10 times you can't hit it.
Right.
And where that 435,000 square foot number came from, I'm not quite sure, but, I mean,
Isn't that what the area is of the mall?
no, it's 10 acres. I think the
10
mall's
acres.
100
Yeah,
and
it's-
some odd
oh, is it?
acres.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
So I
So minimum of,
I just think it seems to be so project-specific, and the projects are market-driven, and it's so hard to develop regulations that are really beyond your control in those two areas. I think if you can write a zoning, or amend a zoning code to be more flexible than it already is and invite more types of development, I think that's your ticket. Of course, that then opens the ability for other areas besides Eastview Mall, too, to use that zoning.
I've got some good feedback here to think about, and maybe even provide some more dialogue back to the town board or Kim's office. Maybe we can do something with the existing PDD regs that is either encouraging or recognizes the Eastview Mall site, or, I don't know, something. I'll have to think about it a little bit more. Because maybe you're right. Maybe the creation of a brand-new zoning district, maybe that's not the way to go. But, yeah. Could be.
yeah, all right. I
Yeah.
think we've kind of covered a lot. If anybody has any thoughts and they want to pass them on to Wes, in the coming week or weeks, feel free to, I don't know, send something in to Lisa and she can distribute it accordingly, so, to everybody. And we can hear your thoughts. So,
Okay,
that's the agenda for this evening. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Ernie moves.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody have a great weekend coming up.
Well,
I didn't mean to kick you out of the way,